going to jump into our message time right now, and here's why. Because I think that as we look at this text, there's just some things to celebrate. And there's some songs that we're going to sing at the end. We're going to still have our prayer time and our communion time. But we just want to really celebrate the reality in the text that we're looking at today. Does that sound good? You guys are all flexible, right? Awesome. So we're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 9 is where we're going to be looking at our text today. And so here's the big thing. We need to review last week for just a moment. Remember last week we had David. He wanted to build God's temple for him. He looked at the tent of the tabernacle, right? And it looked a little shaggy and a little rough, a little worn, a little tattered. And David looks at his big palace. He looks at this little tabernacle tent and says, man, I want to do something about that. I want to fix that. I want to build God a big house, right? And God says to him, no, you're not going to do that. That's not going to be your job. And what we know, if you read my all-church email this week, we know that David was called by God to be kind of the warrior king. And so that was his job. His job wasn't to be the builder king. His job was to be the warrior king. And so we got really 3 life change principles out of the text last week. And the first one is this. It's the grace principle. And the grace principle helps David understand that God doesn't need him to build a house, because God could build his own house. As a matter of fact, through David, God's going to build a big house, right? And it's going to last a long time. And so all of a sudden, David understands, whoa, I'm just a man. God's done this for me. I should be a shepherd boy out in the pasture with a bunch of sheep. But God has made me king of this powerful nation, and that's my role. And then the second principle is the generosity principle. And the generosity principle says when we understand grace, we begin to change the way we live. We change the way we treat other people. We change the way that we behave. We're obedient. We're faithful to everything that God has done. And then the third principle is just the bummer principle. You remember that? Because David in his heart, man, he really wanted to do this for God. And God says, no, you're not going to do it. And it was kind of like, bummer, right? Have you ever had that experience in your life where you really thought God wanted you to do something and you were thinking about doing it, you wanted to do it, you were praying about doing it, you were starting to prepare to do it, and then it's like the door slams shut right in your face, and it's like, bummer, right? And that's called the bummer principle. It just is. And so we have these principles, which is going to be really important as we look at the text today. I'm not going to read chapter 8 to you because chapter 8 has a whole bunch of names that I can't pronounce. Okay? And so if you can do it, then you can preach it. Okay? I'll let you have a Sunday just so I can sit there and listen to you try to do it. Okay? And so it's going to be bad enough today with these words. Like I get made fun of because sometimes that Oklahoma twang comes out anyway. And I tell people, when I moved to Oklahoma, I didn't know what a fire truck was. I was like, fire truck? Fire? Right? That great big fire truck with the great big tires on it that takes lots of oil. Right? And those firemen go down the fireman pole. I'm like, what's a pole? Right? Oh, it's a pole, right? And so when I get into these Bible names, I start saying names that I just move with me. Does that make sense? Just go along with it. You know, Mephibosheth is going to be one of the words this time. Say Mephibosheth. I can't even do it right now, see? Mephibosheth 10 times fast. All right? Sound good? So this is what's been going on in chapter 8. David, you remember? He was used to Saul running for his whole life, like trying to, he's just running like crazy because Saul wanted to kill him. He becomes king, and you'd think that things would settle down. But they didn't. All the neighboring nations think, hey, we've got a new king. Let's go put him to test. And so he has all these battles against the Philistines. Saul's family's trying to rise up against him and kill him. I mean, this is just getting intense and pretty crazy. And so things finally settle down just enough, just a little bit, to where he can actually calm and actually be king for a little while. And so that's what we're going to pick up in 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. This is what it says. And David said, is there still anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now, remember several weeks ago, we were looking at David and Jonathan, their friendship, and we learned some things. Like, for example, a friend is successful when he helps his other friend become successful, right? That was one of those concepts that we were trying to wrap our head around. And so here's David. Things are finally calming down a little bit, and he's sitting there, and he's thinking, where is Saul's family? Where's Jonathan's family? Is there anyone left? And this is an interesting question because if you became the new king, one of your first tasks was probably to execute everybody in the previous king's family. So for like immediate thoughts, we're thinking David's thinking about doing that, right? He's thinking about fulfilling that. But if you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 20, where we looked several weeks ago, this is what it says. But should it be pleasing to my father to do you harm? This is a conversation between David and Jonathan. You remember? Jonathan's like, hey, my dad's not trying to kill you. David's like, oh, yes, he is. Haven't you seen at the family dinner the arrows shoot across the room? He's trying to shoot me with those arrows. And Jonathan's like, no, he's not. And so there's this conversation. Well, if he's really trying to do you harm, right? And the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also if I do not disclose it to you. So it's just this conversation. Are you going to tell me? Am I going to tell you? Ultimately, Jonathan says, may the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. And if I am alive, please show me steadfast love of the Lord that I may not die. So there's this agreement. There's this promise. There's this covenant that's being made. Chapter 20, verse 16 says, and Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as his own soul. This promise that David would not destroy his household when he became powerful. And so chapter 24, verse 20 says, and now behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hands. Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. And David swore this to Saul. He swore this to Jonathan. He made this promise. So here we are in chapter 9. Everything's calmed down. David's actually able to be king. He's not fighting. And the question he asks, in verse 1, is there anyone still left in the house of Saul, that I may show what? Kindness to him. This word kindness really can be translated as grace. And it's going to be a beautiful picture of grace as we look at this text today. It's going to be incredible, I think, because we're going to see off the pages of David's life, we're going to see Jesus. And we're going to see it so thoroughly. So look at verse 2 with me. It says this, now there was a servant to the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. Now imagine, you're the servant, right? You're the slave of King Saul, and the new king's calling you. How are you feeling? You're probably a little nervous, aren't you? You're probably a little scared. And so called him, and the king said to him, are you Ziba? Why are you asking, right? And he said, I am your servant. And the king said, is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may show kindness of God to him? Is there not somebody else I can show this kindness to? I love this. Ziba said to the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet. And this crippled in his feet is an interesting text. It's an interesting fact that we have here. And so I love this. And so we had to go back to 2 Samuel chapter 4. And this is what's going on in 2 Samuel chapter 4. This is when Jonathan and Saul actually die. They're actually killed in this battle. They're dead, right? And so look at what verse 4 of 2 Samuel says. It says, Jonathan, the son of Saul, had a son who was crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when he received the news about Saul and Jonathan. This is that they're dead, right? Look how his feet get crippled. And a nurse took him up and fled, and as she fled in her haste, he fell and became lame. He became crippled in his feet, and his name was Mephibosheth. Say that 10 times fast. Mephibosheth, I can't even say it once right. So this is what's going on. Think about it, right? The new king would kill the entire family, so this nurse, this nanny, basically, of this 5-year-old child, picks him up and begins running for their life, and somewhere as they're running, she drops him, and he becomes crippled in his feet. And so look at chapter 9 again, verse 4. Chapter 9, verse 4 says this, the king said to him, where is he? And Ziba said to the king, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodabar. At Lodabar. This is a crazy, crazy thing here, okay? Because the name Mephibosheth, man, see, I can't even get it out, means one who scatters shame. That's what it means, one who scatters shame. Where is he at? He's in this neighborhood called Lodabar. What is Lo? Lo means no, and Dabar means pasture land. So here's the one who scatters shame is in the desert place where nothing can grow, where nothing flourishes, where everything is dead and desert place. The one who scatters shame is in the desert place. That's what this is meaning. This is what the need. Could you imagine? Hey, thanks, Mom and Dad, for naming me the son of shame. Appreciate that. Wow. So look at this. Verse 5. Then King David, he sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodabar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. Why? Because if he didn't do this, he would likely be killed. This is, Mephibosheth is already thinking, I'm going to go see King David, and what is King David going to do to me? He's going to kill me. He found me. He knows I'm alive. He knows that Jonathan's my dad, and he's going to fulfill his responsibility of king, and he's going to execute our entire family, and I'm the last one. And so he goes to the palace, and what does he do? He falls on his face, and he begins to honor David as king. And David said, Mephibosheth, and he answered, Behold, I am your servant. And David said to him, Do not be afraid, do not fear. Man, I love this. Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. You came here and you're getting something you didn't expect. I'm going to show kindness to you. I'm going to show kindness to your family because I was your father's friend and I made a promise to your father's friend. And get this, David is king. He has zero responsibility to fulfill the promise that he's made. Zero. He can do what he wants to do because he is the king. And so he tells Mephibosheth that he is going to show kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. Get what's going on here, please. Please, just open your hearts and open your eyes to the reality of what's going on here. Mephibosheth, who's crippled, he's outcast, he's unaccepted by society. He's in the desert place. His name means one who scatters shame. He's hiding. He's hiding in the most unpleasant place you can imagine. It's like driving through Arizona in the middle of summer on a desolate highway and your car breaks down. I mean, picture this. This is that desert place, and I know some of you have experienced that. And it's hot and it's horrible. And his name means to scatter shame. Have you ever felt shame before? Have you ever experienced shame because of something you've said or something that you did? You know, it's that thing that happens in the quiet place, in the secret place where you want nobody to know about, and yet you feel this incredible amount of shame. And you feel, when you feel that shame, you feel isolated and you feel drawn off from everybody else. You feel lonely. You feel like you are in this dead place, right? Am I the only one that's ever felt that? Yes. And so, sometimes we're like that. Sometimes we're in this desert place. We're feeling shame and guilt. And there's these secrets, there's these things that we hold down into that crawl space. You remember from the Gospel of John? We hold on to those things deep down into that crawl space. We don't want anybody to know. Some of us walked in here today with secrets that we don't want anybody to know about. Some of us walked in here with sin that we just can't shake. And you feel isolated and you feel alone and you feel like you're the only one who could possibly experience this way. And all the while we are feeling that shame and feeling that guilt in this desert place, this no pasture land, it's dry and it's isolated and it's empty and it's unfulfilling. We have a king in a palace who is saying, I have prepared a table for you. And I want you to come into my palace, and I want you to sit at my table, and I want to treat you as if you are my son or my daughter. Do you catch what's happening here? Look at verse 8. Verse 8 says, And he paid homage and said, What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog such as me? Man, do you think Mephibosheth had some self-esteem issues? I mean, he was named Mephibosheth, which means the son of scatter shame, right? Thank you, Mom and Dad. Thank you. If you look up your name and it does that, you should go have a conversation with your parents now. Okay? Maybe this is why this name isn't on the most popular, 50 names for boys today. Anyway. But he thinks, I'm just a dog. I came from Saul's lineage. I'm crippled, which means I'm outcast. People look at me weird. They treat me funny. They don't let me buy things in the normal store. I'm outcast. I'm a nobody. He's from the tribe of Benjamin, so he doesn't even belong in the tribe of Judah. I mean, he just views his life as meaningless, empty, purposeless, I'm a dog. And not even a living dog. I am as good as a dead dog. And because that's what shame does to us, doesn't it? Shame does that to us. It isolates us and it makes us feel as if we were worth nothing. It makes us feel empty, lifeless, like God couldn't possibly use me. God couldn't possibly even acknowledge me. I'm so far out of the realm of attention that God doesn't even know where I am. I'm telling you right now, all of that is a big lie. Look at verse 9. And then the king's called Ziba, right? Remember Ziba? He's just the servant. He's just Saul's servant. He deserves to be as dead as anybody else in the kingdom, in Saul's kingdom. It says this. He said to him, all that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table. Do you see what's happening here? David's saying, listen, I'm going to give some of Saul's land to you. I'm not really giving it to you. I'm giving it to his grandson. But since you're the servant, you can get your entire family, your whole family, and you can go and you can take care of this land, and you can farm it, and you can produce on it, and you can use it to feed your family. Because here's what's happening. I'm telling you that I'm doing it for Mephibosheth. We'll call him Mike, okay? I told you I'm doing it for Mike, right? But here's the deal. He's going to be at my table. He's going to be at my table where there's plenty of food, where there's the best food, where he's going to be treated as if he's one of my own sons. Now, Ziba and his 15 sons and 20 servants. And then Ziba said to the king, according to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so will your servant do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth, here we go, lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both feet. Isn't this an incredible picture of who Jesus is? It is, and I hope that you feel this because we are out here in this desert place. And so I want to tell you just two quick truths that I think are really important for us to wrap our head around. And the first one is this: we are Mephibosheth. We are him. Because we are the ones who scatter shame. We have sin in our lives, right? Do this just to make sure. Turn to the person sitting next to you and say, you're a sinner. Come on. Now be sure to turn back and say, and so am I. Some of you are holding back. I can see it, right? Some of you are real eager to tell your wives, you are a. Anyway. And some of you added dirty rotten in there. I heard it. But here's the deal. We are the ones. And today, you fall into one of two categories. Each of us fall into one of two categories. The first category is we are out in that desert place and we are feeling that shame and that isolation and we are alone and we don't want anybody to know what's really going on in our life. And we're sitting there and the difference between the other group is that you have no idea that there is a king somewhere who has prepared a table for you that is beautiful and lush and it has the best food from the best land at the best place, and you can be there as if you were one of the king's sons and daughters. The other group of us, we've been there. We've experienced the table, and we know we are the king's son, and we know we are the king's daughter. And occasionally we say, excuse me, I'd really like to go back to Lodabar. Why? Why do we do that to ourselves? Like, we know that there's this table. I've got a seat at the table. I can sit there, and the king is calling me his son or his daughter, and he's giving me his food, and I'm in this palace, and it's like mine. And sometimes I say, oh, hold on. I'd really like to go back to this shame and this isolation and this loneliness. We've never done that, have we? Anybody? Yeah. So we fall into one of those two categories today. And I think the challenge for us is if you're in this category where this is all you know is guilt and shame. And all you know is isolation and loneliness. And if all you know is the sin that just you keep coming back to over and over, I want you to hear so clearly from me today that there is a king who has set a table, and he has a place at the table for you to sit. And you can eat, and you can be considered the king's son and the king's daughter. For the second group, who we know there's this king's table, and sometimes we're tempted to go over here, stop it. Just stop. There is nothing better than what's served before you at the king's table. You with me? The second reality is this: we are David also. Now, I'm not saying that you're Jesus or God, okay? But we are David, and this is what I mean by that. David, he crossed culture lines. He crossed customs. He crossed all these barriers. He crossed tribal lines. He crossed every line that you could imagine to invite this man into his household. We need to do that too. Romans says, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring this good news. How beautiful are the feet of those who get up from the table not to go back to Lodabar to stay, but to goes back here across the lines to say, listen, there is a king, and he has a palace, and he has a table set with a lot of food, and he's got a chair for you to sit there. So in a lot of ways, we're David. We need to break every line that there is. And listen, our culture puts up all sorts of lines. We put up lines with customs and social economics, and we put up lines with sin even, right? Like, oh, this sin's accepted in the church, but this one's not. Really? Really? I'm meddling. I won't do that. I wasn't even prepared. I do this to you guys. I'm sorry, second servicers. But we need to cross those lines racially, economically. Cross them and invite people, no matter what your condition, crippled and lame, impoverished or wealthy, black, red, yellow, or white. They are precious in His sight. And He is a table prepared for every one of us, where there is lots of food, where you would be considered the son of the king and the daughter of the king, and his inheritance is ours. Man, do you believe this today? Do you believe this? See, David's grace towards Mephibosheth was a rhythm for us in how we should serve other people. This is the rooted rhythms of life change. We have these strongholds, right? We talk about strongholds sometimes, and they hold us into this dark place, in this land that is dreary, the land that is dry, where there is shame and guilt and isolation. And God constantly is saying, I'm calling you out of that darkness into my light. And the light is this beautiful table where you can sit and eat. And when we've experienced grace, we saw this last week, we become generous, and we will do whatever it takes to invite others to share in the table also. I think that this is something to celebrate. I think this is one of the most beautiful pictures of the gospel message that we could see. And I love what the last verse says. Did you catch the last verse? He gets this big reward. He can eat at the king's table. He can do this life as a son or daughter of the king. And it still says, yet he was still crippled. See, we're still going to have the struggle, aren't we? We're still going to have the fight. We're still going to have the temptation. We're still going to have to strive. But listen, when we've eaten at the king's table, there's no going back to the junkyard. And here's what I want us to know. Jesus has made the way for us to experience this full life, this complete life. Jesus made it possible so that you and me, we can sit at the table and we can be the king and the king's son and daughter, and we can eat from his table and be full. I believe that that's something to celebrate. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to sing some songs. We're going to have our prayer time. We're going to have communion. And we're going to celebrate the reality that you and I, we didn't deserve it, we didn't earn it, but we are invited to sit at the table with the King. And today I want you to know that, and I want you to believe that, and I want you to hold on to that. And I want you to let that change your life today. And so let's stand together and let's sing this song.
still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
And I'm going to invite you right now to come forward if you'd like prayer. Here's what I'm thinking. Some of you absolutely can relate to Mephibosheth, and you understand what it means to be in that desert place, that lonely place. And I would just encourage you right now, would you just approach God? That's what this invitation is. It's just an opportunity for you to approach God in a real way and say, listen, I want to sit at the table. Maybe this is the first time you know anything about that. Don't leave today without talking to me or one of our other pastors or leaders about what it means to sit at the King's table and how to get there. Does that sound fair? But here's the thing, because we're also David, there could be some people in our lives that we have to do what David did, and we have to break down all the barriers, and we need to invite some people to sit at the table with us. For some, there's marriage struggles in here. And you need to say to your husband or wife, listen, we need to sit at the table, the King's table, together. Some of you have broken relationships with your kids or with your parents. And I know that there's pain in there, and I know that there's things. But we need to be like David, and we need to extend grace to them. There's neighbors who irritate us and aggravate us. And there's all sorts of other categories of people who offend us. And we need to say, I'm going to give you grace just like He gives us grace. And so I want to pray about those things right now. God, thanks for today, and thank you for David's kindness. And that David's kindness is a picture of the kindness that you've given us. And it's a picture of the kindness that you want us to give others. And yet I know for sure that as we gather here, there are some of us who are struggling. We have that secret sin that causes shame and guilt and isolation. And God, we want to sit at your table. And so thank you for making a way. Thank you for making it possible through your Son Jesus that we can have a place at the table where we can be called your sons and daughters. And we can eat from your table, which is full. It is full. And it will leave us full. I know that in this crowd there are some who are struggling with sickness, with disease. And I pray for healing. There are some in here today who are struggling in their relationships, and I pray for reconciliation. There are some who are struggling financially, and I pray for a breakthrough. There are some who are struggling, and that's all they know how to describe it as. It's just a struggle. Sometimes it's a struggle to get up in the morning. Sometimes it's a struggle to go to the workplace that we don't like. Sometimes it's a struggle to deal with the person that you seem to have put in our life. We need your help. Most of all, thank you for giving us a place at your table. In Jesus' name.